Darius Wade was 39 years old, a structural foreman who had spent the last 14 years building things designed to outlast the people who ordered them. He drove a 2017 Ram 1500 with 112,000 miles on it, and a dent in the rear panel he had never bothered to fix. He wore the same pair of Timberland Pro boots to every job site, because they still had work left in them. He kept a thermos of black coffee in the truck's cup holder every morning, filled before 5, drunk slow. He had been missing for 11 days, not in the way people go missing, in the way the military sometimes uses that word before they use another one. His convoy had gone dark in the Sahel corridor on a private security contract. Communications failed. Search protocols were initiated. By day 4, someone with access to preliminary casualty reports had placed a call to his next of kin. His wife Camille had received that call on a Thursday morning in late March. He walked back into his own house on a Monday. She was standing in the kitchen in a black dress, surrounded by people, holding a glass of white wine. She had no idea how wrong she was about what came next. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The neighborhood was quiet when Darius pulled onto Aldercroft Drive. It was 6:48 in the evening. The sun had mostly gone. The streetlights were just beginning to consider themselves necessary. He had been sitting in a debriefing room in Raleigh for 6 hours before they put him on a flight to Charlotte. He had not slept in the conventional sense for 4 days. His left forearm had a bandage that needed changing. He had called Camille's cell from the airline gate. No answer. He had called a second time from baggage claim. Nothing. He had considered texting her but could not think of what to say. He was alive. He supposed she would figure that out when he got home. He pulled into the driveway. There were 11 cars parked on the street that he didn't recognize. He could hear music through the front door. Not grief music. Not the kind of thing you put on when a person is missing. Something with a beat. Something people dance to. Darius sat in the truck for a moment. He looked at the house he had paid for. He could see light through every window on the ground floor. He could see shapes moving. He picked up his duffel bag. He got out of the truck. He used his key. The hallway was full of coats and shoes. Past the entrance, in the living room, there were people he had never seen. 12, maybe 15 of them, in good clothes, with drinks. Someone had pushed the furniture back against the walls. There were flowers on the mantel. There was a banner pinned above the fireplace that he read once, and then looked away from. He walked toward the kitchen. Camille was standing at the kitchen island with her back to the door. She was laughing at something. She was wearing the black wrap dress she saved for occasions. She had done her hair. She was holding a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. The man standing closest to her was about 6 feet fit in a charcoal blazer. He had his hand on the counter near her hand, not touching. Near, she heard the room go quiet before she turned around. When she turned around, she saw him. The glass didn't drop. She caught it, held it. She stood perfectly still for 4 full seconds, he counted them, and her face went through 5 different expressions without settling on any of them. Nobody said anything. Darius looked at her. He looked at the man in the charcoal blazer. He looked at the banner above the fireplace. He set his duffel bag down on the kitchen floor. "Darius," she said. He noticed the ring on her right hand, a ring he had never seen before. She had moved her wedding band to her right hand. He did not say anything about it. He filed it away the way he filed everything, quietly, without deciding yet what it meant. "You're," she started. "Home," he said. "I'm home." He walked past her, past the man in the charcoal blazer, to the refrigerator. He opened it, found a bottle of water, and drank half of it standing there. He could hear the room beginning to reassemble itself behind him. Voices starting up again, lower than before. The music cut off. Someone was asking someone else something in a whisper. He walked back through the kitchen. He picked up his duffel bag. "I'm going to get cleaned up," he said. "We'll talk later." He went upstairs. He did not look at the banner again. But he had read it. Once was enough. Free at last, our girl is free. 3 months before any of it, before the contract in the corridor and the 11 days of silence, Darius had been building something real. His company, Wade Structural, LLC, which he had registered with $8,400 in savings and a belief that his work spoke loudly enough not to need advertising, had just landed its largest contract. A mixed-use development in the South End. 8 stories, $12 million in structural work. His name on the bid, his stamp on the drawings. He had been working 60-hour weeks since January. He woke at 4:45 every morning, drove to the site before 6, and came home after 8 on most nights. He was tired in the sustainable way, the way that comes from building something that will outlast you. He had wired Camille's home office the year before they got married. Not hired it done. Done it himself. 4 weekends in October, pulling conduit through the attic space and running circuits with the same care he used on commercial projects. She had wanted recessed lighting over her desk, a dedicated circuit for her equipment, 2 USB outlets in each wall. He had given her all of it. He had repainted the room when he was done so you couldn't tell anyone had been in the walls. She had thanked him by saying it looked nice. He had noticed, over the previous 6 months, that she came home later on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He had told himself she was at the gym. She had mentioned a Tuesday-Thursday workout routine once, months earlier. He had held on to that. He was the kind of man who extended good faith the way he extended structural support, past the point required. Because he believed in the load. His site supervisor, Marcus, had said to him once over lunch on the Aldercroft Drive project, "Darius, you're the only foreman I've worked under who never raises his voice on a job site and always gets better results than the ones who do." He hadn't thought much about it at the time. That was what Camille had never understood. Until the night the 11 days ended and he walked through the front door. Her name was Roberta Quinn. She was 64 years old, small and straight-backed with silver hair cut close. She had worked 31 years as a forensic paralegal for a firm in uptown Charlotte before retiring in 2021. She lived 3 houses down from Darius and Camille on Aldercroft Drive, and she had watched things from the beginning. She had not said anything, not because she didn't know, because she had been waiting for the right moment. And she understood that the right moment had not yet arrived. She rang Darius's doorbell on a Wednesday morning, 8 days after he came home. He had been sleeping on the couch. He had spoken to Camille twice in those 8 days, once the night he came home, once the morning after. Both conversations had been short. Both times Camille had not answered the question he had not yet asked out loud. Roberta Quinn was standing at the door with a folder, a Tupperware container of cornbread, and the expression of a woman who had something important to say and intended to say it correctly. "I'm going to tell you what I saw," she said. "And then I'm going to show you what I kept. I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything." Darius stepped back from the door. They sat at the kitchen table. She opened the folder. The first entry was dated 14 months ago. She had kept a log, neat columns, dates, times, descriptions, license plate numbers. She had done it the way someone keeps records for a court, with the awareness that what you document becomes evidence and what you only see disappears. The man in the charcoal blazer was named Preston Gale. He worked in commercial real estate. He drove a white Mercedes C-Class, plate beginning with Simmer. His car had been parked on their street on Tuesdays and Thursdays, beginning in January of the previous year. He had walked into the house at a time when Darius was reliably at the job site. He had left, on average, 2 hours and 20 minutes later. Darius looked at the plate number in Roberta's logbook. He didn't say anything. He had seen that car before. A Tuesday evening in September. He had come home early because a delivery had been delayed. The white Mercedes had been parked 2 houses down, engine cold. He had noticed it because it was angled wrong, pointed into traffic, the way someone parks when they intend to leave quickly. He had filed it away and not gone back to it. "There's more," Roberta said. She turned to a section of the folder marked with a paperclip. While Darius had been on the security contract, while the 11 days were passing, and the casualty report was circulating and Camille was receiving condolences and planning parties, something had also been happening with money. Specifically, $94,000 of it. The joint account they had maintained for household expenses had been drawing down for 7 months. Roberta had not known about the account directly, but she had spoken to a friend, a retired accountant named Gerald Fitch, who had agreed to pull what he could with what she had. What Gerald Fitch found was that the account had been methodically reduced. Amounts between $3,000 and $12,000 moved in 9 transfers over 7 months, always on days when Darius was on site or traveling. The receiving account was registered to an LLC called Gale and Farrow Holdings. Preston Gale. Darius was quiet for a moment. He turned the page slowly and set it back flat on the table. He picked up the Tupperware container, opened it, looked at the cornbread, and set it back down. "Where did the authorization come from?" he asked. "Your wife's signature was on the transfer authorizations," Roberta said. But Gerald found one more thing. She turned to the last section of the folder. "You signed a household financial authorization form in 2022 that gave Camille co-signatory authority on all joint accounts in the event of your extended absence. You were going on that 4-month contract in Senegal." She looked at him steadily. She used the same form. He looked at the document for a long time. Then he stood up. He walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard, at the fence he had built, at the shed he had framed and roofed in a single weekend 3 summers ago. He looked at it the way he looked at a set of blueprints when something wasn't adding up. Not focusing on any single part, looking at all of it together. He could see the whole shape of it now. He didn't move fast. That was the part no one who didn't know him would have predicted. He called an attorney named Sylvia Dorset on a Thursday morning. She had come recommended by Gerald Fitch. She called him back at 6:12 a.m., which told him what kind of attorney she was. She did not add drama to bad news. She gave him a framework in their first conversation. What they had, what they could prove, what would take additional documentation, and what he needed to not do between now and when she told him it was time. "Don't move out," she said. "Don't change accounts. Don't tell her what you know." "Can you do that?" "Yes," he said. The forensic work took 6 weeks. Sylvia Dorset brought in a financial investigator named Thomas Park, who had spent 11 years doing this kind of work for a litigation firm. Thomas Park went through 14 months of bank records, 3 LLCs, 2 brokerage accounts, and a real estate holding filed in Mecklenburg County. What he found was worse than Darius had expected, and cleaner than he'd feared, meaning the documentation was traceable, unambiguous, and complete. The $94,000 from the joint account was the front of it. Behind it, Gale and Farrow Holdings had used those funds as a deposit on a property in Noda, a converted industrial space, 4,200 square feet. The deed had been filed 2 weeks after the casualty report was circulated. Camille's name was not on the deed. Preston Gale's was. But a limited partnership interest document, filed separately, listed a third party as a silent partner with a 22% stake. The third party's name was an LLC registered in Delaware. The registered agent for that Delaware LLC was Camille J. Wade. She had filed it in February, 8 months before Darius came home alive. He stood over the documents at Sylvia Dorset's conference table. He understood the sequencing now. He had thought about it the way he thought about conduit runs on a complex job. You don't pull wire before the conduit is in. You don't move until the structure can hold the load. She had been building this for months. She had been waiting for a clear path. The 11 days were supposed to be that path. She had been wrong about one thing. She had been wrong about the most important thing. She had mistaken patience for the absence of capability. It wasn't. Patience was his most practiced skill. It was just the one she'd never had reason to watch him use. Camille called him 3 times that month. He answered twice, calmly, briefly, and let the third call go to voicemail. In the voicemail, her tone had changed. The softness had tightened. She mentioned that she thought they should handle things like adults, that she hoped he wasn't letting other people put ideas in his head, that there was no reason this has to get complicated. He listened to it twice. Not because it upset him. Because he wanted to remember the exact shape of how fast she had moved from grief to management. He called her on a Tuesday. His voice was even, cooperative. He said he thought they could resolve things without it going to court, that he wasn't interested in making it harder than it needed to be. She agreed before he finished the sentence. He could hear the relief she was trying to keep out of her voice and mostly failing. He told her he would have his attorney reach out to hers about scheduling. He ended the call. Sylvia Dorset was sitting across the table. "She thinks this is already over," Darius said. Sylvia said nothing. She refilled his water glass. Darius arrived 22 minutes early. He liked it that way. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a building in South End, a building, coincidentally, that his company had done structural work on in 2019. Neutral walls. A long oak table, floor-to-ceiling windows with the city in the background. Unhurried and indifferent. Nothing on the walls. Exactly the kind of room where the floor doesn't move unless someone moves it. Sylvia Dorset arrived at 9:03, followed by Thomas Park, who set his documents at the end of the table with the efficiency of a man who had done this many times. They arranged. The room was quiet. The only sound was the building's ventilation and, very faintly, the city below. Camille and her attorney came in at 9:14. She had dressed for a negotiation. Tailored jacket. Hair precise. She walked into the room with the confidence of someone who believed they were arriving at a conclusion. She glanced at Darius once. A quick, professional assessment. Then she looked toward Sylvia Dorset, as if Darius were simply another party in the room. Preston Gale was not present. She had not brought him. That was the first signal. Sylvia opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming. Before any discussion of settlement terms, there are several matters that require acknowledgement by all parties." She opened her folder. The first document was the transfer authorization form, the one from 2022, the one that had been intended for a 4-month contract in Senegal. Sylvia placed it on the table the way someone places a tool they intend to use precisely. This form was executed in good faith for a specific purpose. she said. Between September of last year and March of this year, it was used 9 times to authorize transfers totaling $94,000 from the joint marital account. The receiving account is registered to Gale and Farrow Holdings. She let that number sit in the air for a moment. This was not the authorized purpose of this instrument. A civil fraud action has already been filed in Mecklenburg County. Camille's attorney looked up from the document. His expression did not change, but something in the quality of his stillness changed. Thomas Park placed the second document on the table, the partnership interest filing, the Delaware LLC, the deed in NOTA. He walked through it with the same level voice he used for everything. Not cold, simply precise. The funds transferred from the joint marital account were used as a deposit on a property filed under Gale and Farrow Holdings, Thomas said. A limited partnership interest in the same property lists a Delaware LLC, Farrow 8 LLC, as a 22% silent partner. The registered agent for Farrow 8 LLC is Camille J. Wade. He placed the Delaware filing on the table. This was filed 8 months before the events that led to Mr. Wade's casualty designation. Camille's expression had not changed, or rather, she had worked very hard to keep it from changing, and that effort was visible to anyone watching closely enough. Darius was watching closely enough. Sylvia placed the third document, a supplemental filing from the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds. "We want to be precise about what we are and are not saying," Sylvia said. "We are not making criminal allegations in this room today. What we are doing is disclosing that this documentation exists, that it has been preserved in its entirety, and that it will form the basis of the civil fraud claim unless an equitable settlement is reached that reflects the full financial interest of the marital estate." Camille's attorney looked at the document, then at Sylvia, then at the document again. "We'll need a few minutes," he said. "Of course," Sylvia said. The silence in the room lasted 14 seconds. Darius counted them. Then he stood. He gathered nothing from the table. He had brought only one folder, and it had served its purpose. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Thomas Park's hand. He walked toward the door. He stopped. He turned back to Camille. He said it quietly, only for her. Not as a performance, not for the room, because it was meant for her. "You thought I came home broken," he said. "I came home clear." He walked out without looking back. It did not happen all at once. The NOTA property became unsustainable within 60 days of the civil filing. Preston Gale had extended significantly on the project and the collateral he had counted on: the LLC interest, the partnership stake. The quiet arrangement with his name on the deed and hers on the paper became the central exhibit in a lawsuit he had not anticipated. He had not known Darius was alive until Darius walked into his own house. By the time he fully understood what that meant, the filing had already been served. The settlement was reached in mediation 9 weeks after the conference room. Camille received what a fair accounting of the marital estate provided for, not more. The NOTA property interest she had been building toward was returned to the marital estate as a recoverable asset. The $94,000 was treated as an advance against her share. She was carrying the weight of what she had chosen, the way a person carries something they cannot set down. Not dramatically, just constantly. Darius was building something, not fast, the way he built everything. The South End contract had been paused while he was missing. It resumed 4 months later with a modification, an expanded scope that added $1 million to the total. His name was on the revised drawings. He had 6 employees now, a 7th starting in the fall. He answered every call the same day. He gave accurate timelines and hit them. Roberta Quinn came to dinner on a Sunday in September. She brought cornbread again. He had begun to believe this was her signature move. She sat at the kitchen table, his kitchen table. In his kitchen, in his house, with the recessed lighting he had put in years ago still working exactly as designed. And she told him she was glad he was home. He said, "So am I." He meant it more than he had meant anything in years. On a November evening, Darius stood on the back deck of the house on Aldercroft Drive. The air was cold and clean. The neighborhood was settling into night the way it always did. One light going out, then another. A dog somewhere. The distant sound of a train. He was holding a mug of coffee that had gone mostly cold. He didn't mind. He could see the shed he had built in the yard. The one he had framed in a single weekend. The plywood still solid. The metal roof undented. He had built it to last. He had built everything to last. It was the only way he knew how to build. From inside, through the kitchen window, he could see light. Roberta was finishing her tea at the table. She had stayed later than usual, talking about nothing in particular, which was its own kind of gift. He looked at the shed one more time. He put on his hard hat and walked toward the work. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.